Dear comrades and friends, it's my proud privilege and a matter of great pride to welcome you to this very important anti-imperialist gathering. We mark this gathering almost every year, but it was interrupted because of the pandemic, and we restarted now, and it will be an annual event. We're marking normally two great events in world history. One is the victory of the Korean people in the Great Patriotic War, and the second one is the start of the Cuban Revolution with the attack by revolutionary forces on the Moncada barracks. But this year, there's a third reason for us, which is specific to our party, namely, it's the 20th anniversary of the founding of this party. We are a very, very small party, and we do our best to keep the flag of Marxism-Leninism alive in this country. First of all, please accept my apologies that I cannot be with you in person for reasons of health, and I'm sending you this message from 4,500 miles away. I hope you will have a very fruitful and enjoyable time today, meeting our comrades and exchanging views with them. We have gone through a very difficult period. It wasn't easy either to form this party or to keep it going for 20 years in view of the colossal amounts of opportunism that prevails in the working class movement of Britain. Opportunism is not an aberration. It's not accidental. It's a product of imperialism. It's a product of monopoly capitalism. A handful of countries dominate the world market, and they make colossal profits, out of which a small portion can be and is devoted by the ruling class to bribe the working class. And the upper layers of the working class, what Lenin calls the labor aristocracy, is bribed. And in every struggle, in every question of foreign or external policy, it invariably sides with its ruling class. Britain, of course, is adept at that. It's the oldest imperialist country. It started bribing its working class long before other countries. But soon, by the turn of the 19th, 20th century, half a dozen other countries had joined this club, and they all bribed the working class. As a result of this, the working class is no longer in the imperialist countries a uniform, cohesive force. It is divided, it's split up. Opportunists and labor aristocrats one side, taking the side of their imperialist bourgeoisie, and the masses of the working people on the other side. We have to constantly struggle against that and continue our work. But we were able to do that because we have been faithful to the banner of Marxism-Leninism. We have inculcated in our members the spirit of Marxism-Leninism. We have done our best to teach them the science of Marxism-Leninism. Now, this is not an easy science. As Marx pointed out, there's no royal road to science. Only those who can withstand its fatiguing climb can hope to reach the luminous summit. We one day hope to be able to reach the luminous summit, but for the moment, it's fatiguing work all along the way. But since Marxism became a science, it has to be studied as a science. Marxist books are not just for reading, they're for absorbing and really, really understanding and mastering. lot of opportunism comes because a lot of workers don't actually make a proper study of it. We inculcate in our members the spirit of investigation and study. Without investigations, you can do nothing. As Chairman Mao said, those who do not investigate have no right to speak. We have always believed that without a revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement. And secondly, that without an organization of the proletariat has nothing. So we held fast to these two revolutionary principles, that of revolutionary theory and that of a militant organization of the proletariat, which in our country we call the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. It's no boast to say that we are the only party that is genuinely Marxist-Leninist in Britain. Of course, there are other parties who claim to be Marxist. It's for you to judge whether you agree with our characterization or not. But we believe we are on the right track. You can judge it by any standard you like. The working class movement got split internationally by the time of the First World War. All the parties that called themselves Social Democratic, which was the name they adopted those days for the communist parties, apart from the Bolsheviks led by Lenin in Russia, all of them betrayed Marxism during the First World War. They deserted the side of the proletariat and joined the bourgeoisie. Now, imperialism is not something you go around in the streets to look for. Imperialism is an economic system. It is a system whereby free competition capitalism has turned into monopoly capitalism. We call it imperialism. And imperialism inevitably has many characteristics. One of them is concentration of capital and the formation of monopolies. The other one is export of capital, because the home market has become too suffocating and too small for capital. So capital, as it were, overflows the brim and finds employment in other countries, less developed countries, where labor is cheap, where there is hardly any regulation, and of course land is cheap, and there is a greater opportunity to make super profits, if you like. And of course it creates its own problems, as imperialism is finding these days, as it has by exporting capital, created formidable rivals to it. A perfectly good example of that is imperialists exporting capital to China. And China now has become the workshop of the world, threatening the economic existence of imperialism. Thirdly, by the time imperialism comes on the stage, the whole world has been divided. And therefore in future, any division can only be re-division. And that means a fight among the existing powers, each one trying to grab the market, sources of investment, and sources of raw materials at the expense of others, which leads to world wars. That is what led to the First World War. Imperialism waged that war with a view to benefiting itself at the expense of its rivals. But into the bargain, to their horror, they ushered in the October Revolution. Now, Mao Zedong rightly said that the October Revolution, the salvos of the October Revolution, brought socialism to China. I go further. They brought socialism to many, many countries. Now, when I listen to a lot of arguments by good bourgeois commentators who do not actually buy the narrative that is put by their ruling class, but they fall short they ask themselves in the question, why can't we all find reasonable solutions to our conflicts and problems? The whole point is that imperialism is incapable of finding real solutions, because what it seeks is not reasonable solutions. It seeks domination. And in the process of wanting to dominate, it necessarily comes into conflict with those who oppose it, who resist it. And that is what led to the Second World War. If the First World War brought the October Revolution in Russia, the Second World War brought into existence a whole set of socialist countries, from China to Korea to Vietnam and several other places. So a whole anti-imperialist socialist bloc was formed. Today, imperialism is preparing for yet another war. This war is at the moment being waged by using Ukraine as a proxy against the Russian Federation. There are a lot of opportunists in the communist movement who simply say that the war in Ukraine is an anti-imperialist war. Our party is firmly of the view it's a war waged by imperialism against Russia, and Russia is fighting a just war, and in this war we are on the side of Russia. And we will support Russia in their anti-imperialist struggle. And in our view, in my party's view, the defeat of NATO in Ukraine would be a defining feature of our movement. It wouldn't directly lead to socialism, but it would certainly make it easier to go along the road of socialism. So anybody who is progressive has a duty to support Russia in this war and oppose NATO imperialist countries. And of course, in doing so, as it costs, our comrades are constantly harassed by the ruling class, which boasts of the freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. But now they're trying to actually arrest and imprison even people going on demonstrations, asking for no more than peace. And so we have to organize ourselves to struggle against it. And you can, if you are prescient enough, you can see that NATO is not interested in the freedom of Ukraine. They couldn't give a damn. They're wasting hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian lives to achieve their own imperialist motives, because imperialism seeks domination, not freedom for anybody. On the other hand, not very far from there, there's a war going on in Palestine. All the imperialist countries are lined up with Zionists, the white racist supremacists with a pernicious ideology who are trying to exterminate the Palestinian people. Our party is firmly on the side of the Palestinian people who are resisting it. It is on the side of the resistance movement in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Syria, in Iran. And we call upon everybody to support this anti-imperialist struggle. Since the October Revolution, the national liberation movements and proletarian revolutions have been the two powerful currents that have been driving history forward. And we have a duty to be on the correct side of history to support the national liberation and proletarian movements for emancipation of the working class. We are a small party. We make no boast of being big, but we hope to be big one day. Small parties can grow, and big parties can disappear, as happened in the Soviet Union. With a correct policy, you can lose because the balance of forces are not favorable at a given moment. But with an incorrect policy, you can never succeed. We believe we got the policy right. We got to create the subjective conditions. We got to go among the masses and bring mass support to our movement. I have said enough by way of greetings. Comrades, I hope you will enjoy the day today, and especially thank the people who are attending the meeting, and especially those representing socialist countries, from People's Republic of China to the DPRK, to Cuba, and various anti-imperialist, the representatives of anti-imperialist governments like the Venezuelan and other comrades. And we thank you for taking the time to be with us. And with these words, I close my greetings to you and wish you all a good health and a successful struggle against imperialism. We will be on the side of the anti-imperialist and socialist countries, not being happy, not being satisfied with the wars going on in Ukraine and in Palestine. The imperialists are preparing for a war in the Pacific against the People's Republic of China. There's an old saying, whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. The imperialists have gone mad not because they have no intelligent people, it's because their intelligence is basically unable to work, committed as they are to an outmoded system which is well past its sell-by date. So whatever they try, the people of the world, again, as Mao Zedong used to say, will strangle them. They'll surround them ring by ring and defeat them. Imperialism may look very powerful, and it is. It's got nuclear weapons. It is able to destroy. It's a dying system, but it's not dead yet. And a dying system is a very dangerous system. So the working class has a duty to be vigilant and to fight against imperialist wars and hope they succeed. But if imperialism dares to launch a third world war, that would be the end of imperialism, just as the First and Second World War did not turn to its advantage. The third one will not turn to its advantage. With these words, I thank you all. Goodbye.
So I'm going to ask, first of all, our comrade Ella, our current chairman of the party, Ella Rule, to give us our opening address, please, on behalf of our party.
Right, dear comrades and friends, I welcome all of you here today to enjoy our annual anti-imperialist barbecue. It was, of course, suspended during the pandemic, but now at last we're able to restart what's been a venerable tradition of our party since it was formed 20 years ago. Now, 20 years seems nothing to those of us who were there at the founding conference in 2004, but there are comrades here who weren't even born at that time, and yet have now become fully fledged communists and a real credit to our party. Now, we have the barbecue at the end of July, not just because the weather tends to be better for barbecues at this time of year, but mainly because two very important dates in the calendar of the international working class occurred around that time. The first of these was the victory of the Korean people against the combined forces of the so-called UN Command, which drew in no fewer than 22 countries in the US's war against Korea. The war that cost 3 or 4 million Korean lives ended on the 27th of July 1953, 61 years ago, with an armistice agreement. To date, there's been no peace agreement. Anyway, it was the first major defeat for US imperialism. And which utterly failed in its mad anti-communist attempt to wipe out the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. This demonstrated to the people of the world that imperialism is a paper tiger that ultimately, for all its wealth, for all its dastardly weaponry and its million-plus brainwashed soldiery, can't defeat the masses of the people fighting in a righteous cause to defend the sovereignty and independence of their country. And then, on the 26th of July 1953, Comrade Fidel Castro led an attack on the Moncada barracks in Santiago, Cuba, which his comrade Raúl Martínez Araras led a simultaneous attack on the barracks in Bayamo. Although the attacks failed in their immediate objectives, nevertheless, they signaled the start of the Cuban Revolution, which proclaimed its victory on the 1st of January 1959. These wonderful events demonstrate the invincible strength of the people of the world and give us tremendous encouragement in the hard and bitter struggles that lie ahead to free the people of the world of the stifling stranglehold of imperialism, which is in decline, which in its decline is even more brazen and frenzied in its cruelty and its destructiveness. No doubt, the representative here from the Cuban embassy, and unfortunately not the representative of the Korean embassy, who would have prepared a wonderful speech for us but isn't able to deliver it. But they'll be telling you more, or the comrade from the Cuban embassy, the ambassador, Comrade Ismara, will be telling you more about their revolutions and their ongoing struggles against imperialism, in which they have our fullest support. And it's a tribute to the struggles of the Korean and Cuban people that the embassies of China and Laos have also come here to lend their fraternal support on this important occasion. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your participation. And we look forward to hearing your contributions. Comrades from China have promised a contribution. Comrade from the Laos embassy isn't quite sure whether, but if you do like to speak, then we would be very, very grateful to hear what you have to say. Anyway, as it's also the 20th anniversary of the founding of our party, I would like to say a few words on this subject to explain what our party is about and why we formed a new party when there was already no shortage of parties in Britain that claimed to be communist in 2004. To understand why we were different, the most important thing to notice is what we wanted to form was a revolutionary party. Proletarian revolution is our number one objective, and everything is subordinated to that. Our studies of the science of Marxism-Leninism have led us to the unavoidable conclusion that the capitalist system, for all the wonders that it has been able to bring forth in the past, has become a threat to the future of humanity and must be overthrown. After its overthrow, it must be replaced by a socialist system that places all major means of production in the ownership of the working class, replacing the bourgeois profiteering motivation for production with the socialist economic planning that seeks first and foremost to meet the needs of the producers, the needs of the working people. But of course, both the overthrow of capitalism and the building of socialism are endeavours that the ruling classes of today's world, led by the imperialist countries, are determined to thwart at any cost, as it spells the end of their power and the end of their billionaire paradise. However, the example of successful revolutions that have taken place in the world, in Russia, China, Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, and Laos, for example, have proved that hyper-powerful, hyper-vicious, hyper-aggressive imperialist powers can be defeated. And indeed, they must be defeated. As long as imperialism continues to rule the best part of the world, there will be the malnutrition of millions in the midst of plenty. There will be terrible wars causing misery and death to millions, flying in the face of humanity's right to consider itself civilized. And the planet will be destroyed bit by bit as every profiteering capitalist and imperialist strongly resists all attempts to reverse global warming and the terrible damage it's doing as it worsens. All these things drive the people of the world to revolution, and as the lives of more and more people become unbearable and even unsustainable. Marxist-Leninist science teaches us, and life confirms, that sooner or later the downtrodden people of the world rise up to fight against the injustices that are visited upon them. A revolutionary situation arises and fighting breaks out. But not every revolutionary situation and people's uprising leads to a successful revolution. That is because if people don't have a competent leadership, the reactionaries will direct them against the wrong enemy. All too easily, anger against the injustices that are inherent in the capitalist system is diverted into anger against some section of fellow workers, those of a different tribe, those of a different religion, those of a different colour, a different community. Any irrational prejudice that infects the masses will be exploited by the exploiting class to save its class rule. Moreover, the enraged masses, even if correctly identifying their exploiters as the enemy, will collectively, without leadership, not be clear as to how the situation is to be remedied after the exploiters are overthrown. And they might even end up inviting the exploiters back because they know how to do things. So for a revolution to succeed, it must be led by a competent revolutionary party closely linked to the masses and trusted by them. And it's our endeavour to build such a party. And to be honest, it's no easy task. In this country, revolution seems to be so far away that to prepare for it might seem like preparing for the end of the world or for the return of the Messiah. However, those who have prepared for the end of the world have always been disappointed. And worse, even the Messiah hasn't returned. But on the other hand, we have seen many instances of successful revolutions, so we can be confident that our efforts are not being wasted. Marxist-Leninist science makes it clear that the popular uprisings are inevitable. It also makes clear that the capitalist world is suffering a grave economic crisis that has led to massive downward pressure on the working masses, as well as a growing threat of war, as well as of climate catastrophe. We don't know when a revolutionary situation will arise in this country, but we do know that it will, and that when it does, we need to be ready. We can't build a party out of thin air once the revolutionary situation has arisen. We wouldn't have the time to train the cadres or for them to become hardened in struggle, let alone instill the revolutionary discipline. And we certainly wouldn't have time to build the necessary links with the masses and develop their trust in us so that they accept our leadership at that crucial juncture. All this is work that takes years and years, and starting in 2004 was, quite frankly, not a moment too soon. but you'll say the communist organizations that existed before we were formed were doing the necessary work. Regrettably, they were not. We saw that in many important ways they were committed to lines that represented nothing other than a betrayal of the masses. They were all deeply committed to bourgeois electoral politics and worse, to supporting the imperialist Labour Party. In their practical activity, they were engaged in reconciling the working class to capitalism by claiming that the best way to further their interests was to vote for the Labour Party in bourgeois elections. To this day, the best part of their activities is devoted to keeping the Tories out. It should be clear to the meanest intelligence that nowadays the Labour Party mobilises to defeat even workers' economic struggles to defend their wages and conditions. It's a pro-war party that takes its orders from the imperialist ruling classes of the UK and the US. And by and large, the masses understand this better than the so-called communists. For us, the struggle to break the hold of the imperialist Labour Party over the working class movement in Britain is an overwhelming priority. We get called sectarian for exposing people who purport to be friends of the working class, even though that friendship is demonstrably false. How can it be sectarian to oppose class collaboration? But anyway, our party was formed by people who all recognised very clearly that the Labour Party is nothing but an enemy of the people. However, our struggles were not over. Very early on in our existence, we lost a number of cadres because of our stand in favour of immigrants. The ruling class in this country, the bourgeoisie, is ceaselessly encouraging workers to blame immigrants for lack of jobs, lack of homes, lack of decent educational and health provision, etc. Quote, "They come here uninvited and get given our jobs, our council flats, overcrowd our classrooms, live off the welfare paid for from our taxes." But if there are too few jobs, that's not the fault of the immigrants, but of the capitalists who prefer to invest in low-wage countries and in the UK. If there's a lack of homes, it's not because there aren't enough building materials and builders to make all the homes that are needed. And notoriously, of course, London is crammed with unoccupied premises. It's because it doesn't suit capitalism to build houses, and it doesn't suit, for workers anyway, and it does suit capitalists to own empty properties as an investment. And from the ranks of the illegal immigrants, there would be no shortage of people able and willing to assist in the building of homes, not just for themselves, but for everyone else to live in. It's only capitalism that prevents this from being done. Plus, it should never be forgotten that the overwhelming majority of immigrants coming here are driven away from their homelands by the imperialist looting that has horribly impoverished these countries and/or by imperialist wars. Immigrants, most of our immigrants are victims of our very own ruling class, and as such, they're our class brethren, and they must be respected as such. It's not immigrants who are starving the educational system and the NHS of funds, it's the greedy billionaires who are milking these services through privatization. In fact, in the case of the NHS, it's largely the immigrants that keep it going. Obviously, if the working class targets immigrants as the cause of their misery rather than capitalism, they will never be able to conduct a successful revolution. Their anger and their sacrifices will be wasted hitting the wrong target. Therefore, there's no shortcut to winning over the masses by pandering to their worst prejudices. Our job is to go out there and help people see the truth. We had to wave a sad goodbye to those former comrades who refused to serve the masses by addressing their weaknesses. Yeah. We're often called sectarian by people who object to the fact that we make it our business to expose opportunism, which is the selling out of the long-term revolutionary interests of the proletariat in favor of focusing on getting concessions from the capitalists. Believe it or not, we're actually quite willing to accept that many opportunists have the best of intentions, but these good intentions are undoubtedly paving the road to hell. Lenin pointed out in Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, which was written in 1916, that the fight against imperialism is a sham and a humbug if it's not inseparably bound up with a fight against opportunism. He pointed out that the receipt of high monopoly profits by the capitalists makes it economically possible for them to bribe certain sections of the workers, and for a time, fairly considerable minority of them, and win them to the side of the bourgeoisie of a given industry or a given nation against all others. Unquote. Now, these bribes are given for class collaboration, for abandoning the interests of the working class in general in order to receive the bribe. Of course, nobody calls it a bribe. It's a palpable gain in the here and now, rather than the theoretical future emancipation. In the Labour Party-dominated trade union movement in this country, these sellouts are held in the highest esteem and invited to address progressive audiences everywhere, the better to inculcate their class collaborationist message. We are the sectarians who are rarely called on to speak at such gatherings, precisely because we oppose opportunism. For instance, in the Stop the War movement, we called for a campaign in the trade unions to persuade workers not to cooperate with war crimes. Would you have thought that was controversial? No, we won't cooperate with war crimes, no. But this would involve workers not refusing to manufacture weaponry, refusing to transport it, and refusing to disseminate propaganda glorifying imperialist war, etc. Such a proposal, believe it or not, was unacceptable to the opportunists, denounced as divisive of their unity, and it led to our expulsion from Stop the War. Oh, what a shame. Now, people tell us that we can never become a mass party because of our bad manners. What they don't realize, or don't want to realize, is that to prepare for a successful revolution, we need to win people over to the side of truth, even if for the time being they don't want to hear it. We have gained absolutely nothing if we hide or even abandon our important political positions out of a desire to be popular. We might gain some influence with the masses, but it won't be an influence that benefits them in any way. Now, the Sikhs have a saying that they use as a greeting, Sat Sri Akal, and this means that the truth always wins. Likewise, Hegel pointed out that freedom is the appreciation of necessity, necessity being that which is true. As communists, it's our duty to hold fast to the truth, to the unavoidable necessity of proletarian revolution and socialism in the strictest meaning of the word. That's the... Thank you, Mother. That is the only path to defeating the evil that besets the world. It's the only path forward to the emancipation of the working masses and the dawn of a truly civilized world. Let me finish by thanking everybody here who has come to support our party on this important occasion. Your support is greatly appreciated and an important encouragement to us to keep us going even though things are tough. Today, we're just a small party that's taken on a massive job. With your support, and in the case of our guests from the socialist countries, with your example before us, we hope you will you will see the day when our efforts lead to fruition and we're able to lead the British working class in its emancipation and a bright future. Thank you.
Wonderful, Ella, thank you. And I do hate it. It was somewhat timely because I was literally just talking before we started the meeting with Comrade Ismara here, and she was asking me, what can I read to have a history of your party? And I said, oh, that's a good question. I'll have to go away and think about that. I'm not sure we've ever written a history of our party. Well, Ella's made a very good start there, but between Ella's speech and my conversation with Comrade Ismara, I realised that one of the jobs for the next year is to write a history of the first 20 years of our parties. I think it's long overdue. I'm going to try not to do too much speaking in between our speakers. I would like to introduce our first guest of honour, Ambassador of Cuba, Comrade Ismara Vargas Walton. Thank you so much, Comrade.
No problem. Okay. Good afternoon, comrades and friends. Thank you so much for the invitation. We are particularly honored today, and we also join the congratulations to our comrades from the DPRK, although they are not physically here, they are in our hearts, and they do know that we are together and that we share principles and values, which is much more important than anything these days. It's the 20th anniversary of the CPGB-ML. I got it right? Yeah. And as Ella was sharing with us some reflections, very important reflections, and it always takes us back in our history whenever we commemorate anniversaries. And it's a very important moment. It's a moment for us to sit back and think again on what we've done, but at the same time, it's a very important moment for us to think about the future and how we are going to make things better and how we are going to contribute to this world and how we are going to get together with other comrades around the world. And I am very happy that today we are also here with comrades from China, from Laos, from Chile, from Germany, and maybe some other countries I haven't. No, but it's, you know, it's the house. It's the house. But I mean, it's indeed Peru as well. It's indeed an international reunion. It's very important. We have representatives not only from the European continent, but also from Latin America, Asia, you name it. So thank you for organizing this and taking into consideration also the representation of different regions around the world. All of us with features, all of us with probably different backgrounds when it comes to culture, to history, but at the same time, as I said, all of us united by principles. And we have to celebrate that. Cuba continues to struggle because of the imposition of unilateral coercive sanctions. Those unilateral coercive sanctions, which is indeed the most comprehensive and the longest set of measures against a country for more than 60 years, Now, those are the expressions of the imperialism in the face of our country. Cuba, as you very well know, is a very special place when it comes to our history. We are a teeny tiny archipelago in the Caribbean region. However, we have been able to reach to other comrades and friends around the world. And the main feature we have is solidarity. Cuba is very well known, not for interfering on other countries' affairs, but for trying to extend the hand the way we can do it. Cuba, thank you. Cuba continues to be a challenge to the US imperialism. We know that. We are proud of continuing being a challenge, and we're planning on continuing to be a challenge for them. Defending our sovereignty, protecting our culture, helping others in need, those are the basis, those are the pillars of the Cuban foreign policy. We have embassies in more than 130 countries, and most of you have been in touch with some of our embassies. You know, we have very small teams. We have some representatives of our staff member here with us today, 3 of them, 4 with me. However, we try and develop work with the persons in the country we are accredited to, and getting to know very well the possibilities of exchanging and strengthening, fostering relationships. That's the most important job of the Cuban embassy whenever and wherever we are. And you may always feel free, do not hesitate to contact our friends, our comrades around the world, and they will tell you exactly that their relationship with the embassy has been always based on respect and cooperation. And that is one of the topics I wanted to reiterate today. We are also very grateful for the invitation today. This is a very special moment, as it was mentioned already. We have a celebration of the 71st anniversary of the assault to the Moncada barrack in Santiago, and also the barrack in Bayamo, which is probably not very well known, but was also a very important military position in Cuba. Today, those buildings, and that is also an example of the work of the Cuban Revolution, are no longer military barracks. The most military barracks in Cuba turned into schools. And that's the way they remain. It is a very important date in our history, and Ella was very eloquent on that. I was very happy. I got really emotional because it was almost written by a Cuban, the way she expressed the how everything happened in that year. Fidel, along with a group of youngsters, they dared to face the dictatorship. They were bigger, they were way more powerful. And they defeated, as Ella mentioned our group, militarily speaking. However, the seed was already there. And that assault to the Moncada barracks was, we say, the beginning of the last phase towards the triumph on January the 1st, 1959. So when you say, or when you hear somebody speaking about the Cuban Revolution, there are two dates that we cannot and we will never ignore. One is the 26th of July, 1953, and the second is the January the 1st of 1959. Those are main dates in the history of Cuba. On the other hand, we also want to take the opportunity to thank you for the support, the long-standing support to the Cuban cause, and the long-standing support to the lifting of the blockade. It's an illegal blockade imposed by the US. It's been too much, it's been too long, it's about time for them to lift it. However, the US continues to ignore the international community. They even continue to ignore the claims inside the US by the civil society, by religious people, by academic scholars, by the Cuban nationals living in the US. They continue to ignore those claims even coming from members of the US Congress. And that is one of the reasons why we have to continue in our fight. The blockade is, as we speak, the main obstacle to the development of Cuba. The US continues to present Cuba in a way that most people believe that we are not able to make progress, economically speaking. And the reality is that we have prevented to be in a better position because of the imposition of those unilateral coercive measures. We always say to the US, if you consider that we are not in the position to move forward when it comes to our economic achievements, why don't you try for one single day, lift the blockade and let's see what happens. That has never happened, as you know, and we always think what may happen to a more solid economy, and we don't like to call names, but imagine the most powerful country in Europe and having been under that extreme pressure since the economic, commercial, and financial view, and what could have been the result. So in our case, and of course resilience, it's also one of our features, but we try and be creative. We really work hard. You know, we have a hard-working people. Our government continues to implement new measures in order to make it better, in order to try and move forward. But we have to say the economic constraints, the hardships are still there, and the main reason, again, is the imposition of the blockade. Very recently, and we say recently because in history 3 years is basically nothing, Cuba was relisted in the infamous unilateral list by the State Department of so-called state sponsor of terrorism. Because of that designation, these days our country is facing one of the most difficult times ever. And in this connection, we also want to express our thanks to the CPGB-ML for being part of those organizations and parties around the world, and particularly in Great Britain, calling for the removal of Cuba from that infamous list. So once again, thank you very much. The relisting of Cuba after a few years, as you may remember, President Obama removed Cuba from that list, and it was very well explained at the time that there were no political grounds for Cuba to be in that infamous list. But at the very last moment of the Trump administration, he decided to release Cuba. And we may share with you that in 1 week only, we lost more than 40 banks. More than 40 in 1 week. So you may imagine how difficult it is for Cuba to try and have a bank transaction, to simple things, trying to get a credit card. And much more important than that is the fact that we struggle to provide food to our population every single day. There is no way. You are not supposed to carry a portfolio, a suitcase, plenty of currency around the world and paying for the services you receive and for the trade. That's not the way. This is not the 17th century. We are supposed to have normal banking relations with everybody. And the imposition of those unilateral coercive measures called the blockade, and in particular, the designation of Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism has prevented Cuba and the government of Cuba from doing what it's willing to do, which is providing well-being to our whole population. So today, for us, is vital to have Cuba removed from that list. And in this sense, we will appreciate any initiative on your side. And we will highly appreciate any claim at any level with your counterparts around the world, trying to get together and have Cuba removed. It's an unilateral list in which we do not believe. However, the effects are there for us. And especially the fear around the banking system. Because even when the US is not entitled to do so, for most banks, it's a matter of concern. They get worried. They say, well, there is a problem. You are included in this list, so the risk is too high for me to have you as a client. And basically, we have been expelled from most of the banks around the world. And basically, we have been unable to make normal transactions as any other country may have and should have. So in these topics, we take some time to explain a little bit, because it's much more than the political speech. And the US continues to say that Cuba is trying to bring to the table a bilateral topic, but it's not, because of the extraterritorial effects of the blockade. The whole international community is affected. So there is no way, they say, and that by any means we accept that this is a bilateral matter. It's much more than that. And that's why we have been able to gather international support, and that's why we take time to explain to our friends and to our comrades the real nature of these measures. We are opposed to call them sanctions. They are not. Sanctions are measures, and they are even included in the international law, public law. However, the US is not entitled to impose any measure on Cuba. Hence, those are not sanctions. Those are unilateral coercive measures. Sanctions are entitled for people who have break the law. Cuba has not done anything like that. We have no sin. There is no violation of any law. The only thing that we have done for more than 60 years now is defending our sovereignty, and we will continue to do so. So once again, thank you so very much for having us. For me and my family, it's been 4 months in London, and it's been an amazing journey so far. Being away from home, as you know, it's challenging, but at the same time, attending events like this and exchanging with friends in the UK, and we have many, and we are very happy for that. It's something that makes us stronger and also that gives us hope. And we will continue working with all of you, and we will continue spreading the word. We have also the huge responsibility of spreading the real word when it comes to Marxism-Leninism ideology, and we also have the huge responsibility to pass it on to our children and to our grandchildren, for them to continue with the flag, with the standard of the Marxism-Leninism. And thank you so much for having us and for being there for Cuba in solidarity.
¡Viva Cuba! ¡Hasta la victoria! Guys, come in and take a seat. There are seats in the front. Come, quick.
There are seats at the front. Please come.
Thank you, Comrade Ismara, for that absolutely wonderful speech. It is very humbling for us as would-be revolutionaries to be with comrades from revolutionary countries. As Comrade Ella said, you remind us that no matter how hard our struggle is, victory is not only necessary, but possible. And we have to always hold that in our hearts when we are surrounded by people who are infected by the pessimism which has been forced on them by a hostile ruling class. We use Marxism, as a comrade said, to give ourselves perspective on history and to understand, as Comrade Chairman Mao taught us, small things can grow if they are with the tide of history, and big things can disappear if they are against it. The US imperialism seems enormous and powerful, but it is no longer with the tide of history. It is against the tide of history. It's against the interests of the entirety of humanity, and it will go. And small forces like ours, who are sincere, who are genuine, who are not out for themselves, but for the people, who simply work dedicatedly, persistently, to master Marxism, which is our liberation ideology, and to bring it to the people who will use it, those forces will grow. It may seem an impossible dream sometimes. It may seem like you're a Jehovah's Witness knocking at the door of people who are trying to have their Sunday lunch and don't want to talk to you. But the truth is, we have a message that is relevant to people's lives. And increasingly, they are going to wake up and start realizing it. And the fact that we've been doing it all this time and saying the same things, that one day people turn around and say, oh, that party that's been saying these things I didn't want to hear, that party I thought was crazy, all the things they said were true. And that is why the science of Marxism-Leninism is so powerful. As Comrade Ella said, it encapsulates the truth for humanity, as well as giving us weapons with which to fight for our future, with which to understand our present, organize for, fight for, and achieve the future that humanity needs. And it is incredibly important for us here in the belly of the beast, in the oldest imperialist country, the most vicious, most cunning, most experienced bourgeoisie, to be with comrades who have faced that same enemy and defeated it. So thank you again, comrade, for your wonderful Jiao Fei from the embassy. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, comrade. Dear Commit Room, comrades and friends, good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to attend today's celebration hosted by the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, at the invitation of Commit Room. Let me begin by expressing warmest congratulations on the 20th anniversary of the founding of CPGB-ML, and wish your party continued progress and new achievements. I would also like to extend my sincere comradely greetings to all friends here today, especially comrades from the DPRK and Cuba, although comrades from DPRK were not able to come today. The theme of today's event is very inspiring. Indeed, victory comes only from fighting, and lofty goals cannot be achieved without hard efforts. On the first day of this month, we celebrated the 103rd anniversary of the Communist Party of China. Since the very day of its founding, the CPC has made seeking happiness for the people and rejuvenation for the nation its mission. Since then, the party had rallied and led the Chinese people in carrying out revolution, construction, and reform through tenacious and unremitting struggle, and made great achievements. Since the 18th CPC National Congress, the CPC Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, has led the party and the people in continuing the hard work. Through all the efforts, we have won the largest battle against poverty in human history. Finished building a moderately prosperous society in all respects, thus completing the first centenary goal. We have secured historical achievements and seen historic changes in the course of the party and the country. Today's China is full of vigor and vitality. Our economy is the second largest in the world, and our contribution to the world economic growth has remained above 30% for many years running. And our people's sense of fulfillment, happiness, and security has been enhanced. Since the beginning of this year, facing the sluggish global economy and the turbulent international situation, China's economy has been making steady progress. In the first half of this year, our GDP grew by 5%. This impressive performance has been an anchor and driving force for the world. Comrades and friends, China has got where it is today, not through a walk in the park, but through diligent and hard efforts. The 20th CPC National Congress, held more than a year ago, established the central task of realizing the second centenary goal of building China into a great modern socialist country in all respects, and advancing the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation on all fronts through a Chinese path to modernization. Chinese modernization contains elements that are common to the modernization processes of all countries, but it is more characterized by features that are unique to the Chinese context. It is the modernization of a huge population, of common prosperity for all, of material and cultural ethnical advancement, of harmony between humanity and nature, and of peaceful development. Advancing Chinese modernization is a whole new endeavor. On the journey ahead, we'll inevitably be confronted with problems, risks, and challenges. To effectively deal with these risks and challenges and run the vision of Chinese modernization into a reality, we need to uphold the fighting spirit and further deepen reform comprehensively so that we can create sound institutions to provide solid support for advancing Chinese modernization. Last week, the 20th CPC Central Committee held its third plenary session and made strategic plans for further deepening reform comprehensively. The most important outcome of the third plenum was the resolution of the CPC Central Committee on further deepening reform comprehensively to advance Chinese modernization. More than 300 important institutional and structural reform measures have been put forward, with those on the economic front as the spearhead. This new round of reform covers a wide range of other areas, such as political, cultural, social, and ecological ones, and those related to national security, defense, and party building. The overall objective has been set out. This is to improve and develop socialism with Chinese characteristics and modernize our system and capacity for governance. The timetable has also been spelled out. We shall have completed the reform laid out in the resolution in the next 5 years. And by 2035, we'll have finished building a high-standard socialist market economy in all respects, further improve the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics, generally modernized our system and capacity for governance, and basically realized socialist modernization. All of this will lay a solid foundation for building China into a great modern socialist country in all respects by the middle of this century. We believe that with the implementation of these reform measures, China's productive forces will be further unleashed. The vitality of the society will be further boosted, and more benefits will be brought to the people. Comrades and friends, the Communist Party of China is also dedicated to human progress and world harmony. As early as 70 years ago, the Chinese party and government put forward the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, advocating for peaceful coexistence among countries on the basis of equality and mutual respect. In today's world, multiple challenges and crises are intertwined. China will continue to pursue an independent foreign policy of peace, uphold the basic norms of international relations, safeguard international fairness and justice, and oppose hegemony and power politics in all forms. China will continue to pursue a vision of global governance featuring shared growth through discussion and collaboration, call for an equal and orderly multipolar world and a universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization, promote greater democracy in international relations, and work to make global governance fairer and more equitable. China will continue to promote the shared values of humanity, advance high-quality Belt and Road cooperation, implement the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative proposed by General Secretary Xi Jinping, and work for an open, inclusive, clean, and beautiful world of lasting peace, universal security, and shared prosperity. China will always be a builder of world peace, a contributor to global development, and a defender of the international order. China will continue to provide new opportunities for the world without new development and work with all countries to build a community with a shared future for mankind. The greater the cause, the more difficulties and obstacles there will be. Let us continue to strengthen our confidence and keep fighting for our goals. In this process, we'll also make new contributions to the development and progress of mankind. To conclude, I would like to once again congratulate the CPGB-ML on its 20th anniversary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Chow, for that news from China. We are very well aware that today, as the anti-imperialist camp is coming back together, reinvigorating itself and strengthening itself for the battles to come, China is absolutely the economic bedrock on which all the gains that are being made by the people in the world today are possible. So we are very grateful for everything that China is doing in the world to reinforce the struggle of the people for national liberation, for sovereignty, and for socialism. Thank you. Now, I just have to double check. We do have with us Councillor Thaboni Singh-Paraj from Laos. Am I right, comrades, that you don't wish to speak to us today? Then we just thank you for your presence.
Thank you for coming.
We're very grateful. I hope you will stay to talk with our comrades afterwards. Then, before I round up the meeting, our young speaker, I'm going to invite Comrade Dexter from Red Youth to address the meeting and tell us a little bit about why he, as a young person, is part of this struggle.
Thank you, comrades. Comrade Ella mentioned that there are some comrades who are younger than 20 years. I'm slightly older, but still it is funny to think that the party is so young in many ways, but also so experienced so far. So, comrades, what a pleasure it is for all of us to be gathered here for this momentous occasion, 20 years of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. It was a little under 3 years ago that I joined the party, and I don't think I could have imagined at that time giving a speech on behalf of any political organisation or any organisation, let alone Red Youth, our youth wing. Yet such is the energy and vigour in our party, the commitment to Marxist study, that not only helps us understand the world around us and how we can go about changing it, but crucially gives us the confidence to do so. To have around us people who are not only like-minded, but committed, capable, revolutionary cadres. This is invaluable in a country such as our own, where class consciousness is so very low compared with the rest of the world. It's the revolutionary energy of our party, as reinforced by our political study, which I would like to touch on today. I joined the party after a few months of starting my first full-time job. And I was eager to impress my employer. I accepted long hours and little sleep in order to prove I could do the job. It took me just a few months to realise that despite the great amount of work I put into the role, with the job occupying my mind most moments of the day due to the strange hours I was working, I wasn't really getting anything out of it. I didn't feel fulfilled. In Marxist terms, I had quickly become alienated from my labour. I didn't feel a part of the service the company was providing, and really the service wasn't doing anything good for the world. It was just another cog in capitalist economy that didn't really seem to produce anything meaningful. The division of labour under capitalism that under socialism would produce great wealth for the working class by rationally divvying up work, instead removes all pleasure one should get from work. Without Marxism, I could never have put all of this into words. Certainly without the encouragement of the party and the work it's given me to use Marxism in practice and hone my skills not only on the streets, but actually learn new ones in aid of any work the party needs doing. And I wouldn't be the person I am today without this development. The revolutionary energy of the party does not come from nowhere. It's the result of decades of arduous work and faithful study by the founding members of the party, even before it was formed. This culture of work was astonishing to me when I first joined. I'm still in awe of it, and I do my utmost to emulate it. Whenever I talk about party work I've been doing to a friend of mine, he often laughs, "Why would you do it if you're not being paid to do it?" Why? Because it's right. Because I couldn't go forward, having studied Marx and Lenin, without doing something about the wretched world the bourgeoisie has created. And especially not when we know for a concrete fact that we can change it. The Great October Socialist Revolution in Russia did change it. No matter how hard the bourgeoisie may try to make the workers of Britain and the world forget this fact, we will never let them, and we will never let them forget the achievements of the Soviet Union. It's this fact that led me to the CPGB-ML. I didn't really know much about the Soviet Union growing up. I accepted as fact, as many of us did, that Stalin was some kind of dictator, manipulator, mastermind, evil on par with Hitler, and that the Soviet Union was an oppressive country full of miserable people, half of whom were in labour camps, personally placed there by Joseph Stalin himself, of course. Yet, the more I learned in bourgeois history, the more contradictions I found. Turning to left-wing sources penned by various anarchists, and as I would later learn, revisionists and Trotskyites alike, I was just left further confused. It was only the courageous stance taken in Proletarian and now Car that engaged me. Here was a confident stance in defence of the Soviet Union, and one that added up, no less. I was instantly hooked, all of my ideas being challenged at once. I've never looked back since. Even on my lowest days, studying a little Marx, doing a little party work, brings everything back into perspective. Here's to many more years of the CPGB-ML.
I genuinely don't know how to follow that. I feel really moved as a testament to the work we've been doing. You couldn't get better, I don't think. But you know, Dexter said something really important there, that the culture of our party didn't begin 20 years ago. The culture that makes our party began 60 years ago. Our founding chair, Comrade Harpal, and the close comrades around him, who also were the founders of this party, began their work in the 1960s. And they have been working and studying every single day since then. That is the foundation on which our party rests. And of course, they took their inspiration from the comrades who made the revolutions in the Soviet Union, in China, all over the world. They took their guidance from the founders of our great movement, and they have tried to live up to it, and that is what we also try to do. You know, our guests today have reminded us that our struggle against imperialism is a global one. It's common to all humanity. Imperialism is standing in the way of humanity's development. It is a block on progress, on the creative energies and abilities of the workers of the world to solve their own problems and create what the Chinese talk about, a beautiful world, a shared world of common prosperity. That world has been within our grasp for more than 100 years, and it is only imperialism that stops us from realizing that. And with our comrades today, we must redouble our efforts, re-sign our pledges to be part of the movement that sweeps this block on human progress away for good. I'll try not to talk for too long because I know that everybody wants to get to the barbecue. I do want to mention by name a few of the founding comrades who are no longer with us. In particular, comrades Godfrey and Iris Kramer, comrade Deborah Lavin. These were people who were staunch fighters for our party and with us long before we founded our party, and we missed them greatly. There are other comrades, older comrades, we lost from our ranks, like John Heppel, Alan Jones, Mick Appleyard. There are others. And there are, of course, now many of our older comrades who are unable to be with us and play the role they used to play because of health issues. In particular, of course, our founding chair, Comrade Harpal, but our first General Secretary, Zane Carpenter, who was such a stalwart centre of all our work for so many years, our Comrade Blanche Carpenter. We have with us today Comrade Giles, and I'm really happy to see you, Giles. I wasn't sure if you would make it. We owe a great debt of gratitude to the tireless, selfless work of these comrades, and we must remember to emulate their example as we go forwards. You know, Harpal pointed out in his speech that the Ukraine war right now, NATO's proxy war in Ukraine against Russia, to give it its full title, is changing the world. It's revealing, and simultaneously it is exacerbating, the weaknesses of the imperialist system in each imperialist country individually, of the imperialist alliances, of their economics, of their politics. NATO is being defeated by Russia in Ukraine. And this is a consummation devoutly to be wished. You know, if there is going to be the horrific sacrifice of Ukraine's men to the gods of profit by powers that care nothing for human life, we must take from it this positive aspect, which is that the anti-imperialist world is being strengthened in the course of this horrific fight. And we see that process accelerating further with the war in Palestine. You know, the genocide of the Palestinians is not imperialism's first genocide. And it did not begin on 7th of October last year. So what is making such a qualitative difference in the way this ramping up of an already existing genocide is playing out around the world? Well, I think one of the things that's changed is that we are watching it as it happens. We're not finding out about it 10, 20, 30 years later while it was hidden away from us. We, the people of the entire globe, are seeing this genocide play out in real time. And at the same time as it's happening, they are seeing the lies and the hypocrisy of the leaders of their own countries. Simultaneously, they see these two things happening. It could not be clearer. The true face of imperialism could not be clearer than when all of our leaders go rushing to embrace Netanyahu and give him the green light for this, when they continue to send their bombs while shedding crocodile tears over the deaths of women and little children, but saying, well, it's not our fault they're standing on top of Hamas's weapons. What can you do? The Lancet recently gave figures, and I'm sure they'll turn out to be an underestimation of the true death toll in Gaza this year. But again, the positive side of this horrific carnage is that the mass of the world's people oppose what is happening. And when they see that it continues despite their opposition, in spite of their opposition, in spite of every attempt to call the perpetrators to book, the lessons they are learning about the system and about so-called international law and international institutions are invaluable. Because what are they doing? They are pushing us to give up on the idea that we can vote for the solution, that we can trust in our leaders to do the right thing if we just tell them what we want, that we must rely on our own strength. Increasingly, the world's people are supporting the fight of the resistance forces on the ground in the Middle East. And increasingly, they look to a strengthening anti-imperialist camp, to Russia, to China, to the DPRK, to BRICS, to come to the aid, real concrete aid of the people of the Middle East. And in that respect, haven't the people of Yemen become all of our heroes? Absolutely embody what Chairman Mao said about imperialism being a paper tiger and about when history is on your side, you cannot be defeated. That's what the people of Yemen, together with the people of Palestine, of Lebanon, across the Middle East, the resistance forces are showing us that in the end it's not weapons that win the war, it's people. You know, imperialism is in crisis. It's in its deepest ever crisis. This is a system that was ripe for overthrow more than a century ago. It was overthrown in one significant part of the world. Since that time, its contradictions have grown deeper and deeper and deeper. Its irrationality has only become more so. Its complete inability to provide for even a decent proportion of the world's people anything like a dignified existence. It's in crisis and decay, economically, socially, and politically. Everywhere you look around you, you see indications of the last days of Rome. This is an empire which is dying on its feet. But, as has been pointed out, it won't go down without a fight, and it has powerful weapons in its arsenal. But what we see today that gives us such great hope is how the anti-imperialist camp is renewing itself, is recohering in a way we have hardly seen since the Korean War. Who does not remember here what a wonderful example of socialist internationalism was displayed by the anti-imperialist, the socialist camp during the 1950 to 53 Fatherland Liberation War waged by the DPRK. You know, not only the people of Korea fought in that war and suffered tremendously as a result. The true numbers aren't known, but between 4 and 5 million Korean people died during those 3 years of war. If that isn't a genocide, I don't know what is. 1 million volunteers came from China, China which had been fighting already for 14 years, its revolutionary struggle. had only achieved its revolution 1 year before. 1 million volunteers came across the border to support their fraternal nation. They understood that the war was aimed not only at Korea but also at them, at socialism itself. And they came to the aid of Korea. And of course, the USSR also came to the aid of the DPRK. The Air Force that the DPRK had during that war was a Soviet Air Force. Soviet pilots in Soviet planes put on Korean uniforms, and there was a polite fiction between the USSR and the USA about where these pilots really came from, because everybody knew that to openly admit that they were Soviet pilots would be to bring on calls for a nuclear exchange between the USA and the USSR. So they didn't want to do that. But as well as sending an air force to stop the horrific domination of the skies by the imperialists, and every country which has suffered from a US bombing campaign knows what that means. When the USA has dominance of the skies, it is very happy to use it, to bomb the people into the ground, to destroy all their buildings. You know, the USA bragged that Pyongyang would take 1,000 years to rise from the ashes. There was no building in North Korea higher than 1 story remaining standing at the end of that war. So if you want to see what socialism and a planned economy are good for, go today to Pyongyang. It gives us great hope today to see once again Russia and the DPRK, China and the DPRK, renewing and strengthening their bonds of friendship and solidarity, their military, economic, political cooperation. This is the bedrock of the new anti-imperialist world which is rising today. So what's our part in all of this? We don't just sit on the sidelines and say, oh good, someone elsewhere is doing the work that needs to be done. We understand the axis of resistance must be built everywhere. Everywhere. Imperialism must be beaten at home as well as abroad. That's the job of a real communist party. To build the forces which have the steel, the dedication, the understanding. Why do we study? So that we understand imperialism. Why do we build our organization and go through these struggles? So that we have steel. Because it is communists who give the real steel to an anti-imperialist struggle, that give it the determination and tenacity to understand its enemy properly, theoretically, and to keep fighting no matter how hard the conditions. The power of Marxist science, which is in our hands, needs to be in the hands of the masses. It's the masses who make history, not individuals. Not me or you, it's not even our party. Our party wants to play a role in helping the masses to make their history, to live up to their historical destiny. The workers of Britain are the ruling class in waiting. They just don't know it. They need help to understand it. They need the weapon of Marxism to be brought to them by people who are unafraid to stand up to bourgeois lies and prejudice, who can help them to take hold of this weapon, which is their liberation ideology, and to use it. So connecting Marxism with the masses is the #1 goal and priority of our party, and of course that explains why I put such a premium on study, because you can't connect people with something you haven't understood yourself. And just go a little bit more on that topic of study. You know, our whole history, the history of our movement, the history of our party, of more recent struggles, has revealed to us time and time and time again the importance of every single comrade taking responsibility for their own theoretical development. It is not good enough to rely on one or two wise leaders. If you're lucky, they will always lead you right. But what if they start to go wrong? Where are the people to help them see they're making mistakes? Communism rests in the collective wisdom of the crowd. But to have collective wisdom, the members, the individuals of the collective, must have wisdom too.
Yes.
The collective is only as good as the strength of its members. Cannot have a movement that relies on one or two people to know everything. We cannot have a movement that can be so easily decapitated. We need that collective wisdom. The struggles that face us are hard. The enemies that face us are cunning. They have the power to throw money at so many diversions and distractions. Just today I was reading a new article that's been posted online by the rebranded Trotskyite group that are now calling themselves the Revolutionary Communist Party. They're trying to take our clothes and our colours. And under the guise of being communists, they are spreading anti-communist filth. It's the usual tactic of Trotskyites. To be able to face and understand those things requires knowledge, requires study, requires consistent application to the science of Marxism-Leninism, and confidence to bring that to people. It's easy for the RCP to post their lies because those lies are reinforced by everything everybody's already learned. So they fall naturally on the ears and the eyes of the receivers. It's much harder to debunk the lies when you're flowing against the tide of what everybody knows. But we're living in a world where what everybody knows has started to be greatly questioned. It's much easier today than it was 20 years ago to say to somebody this sentence, well, in fact, 3 words. No, 4 words, I can't count. You've been lied to. If you say to anybody now in the country, you've been lied to, they'll agree with you. Yeah. You've immediately got the basis to start a conversation about what you've been lied to about and why. It's much, much easier today to talk to people about the Soviet Union and Stalin and why those things are worth talking about. I was told, someone recently said about our party, well, they're a bit obsessed with old things from the past. You know, no one cares. Nobody cares. The point is, our class has been taught not to care in order to take away from them their understanding of their history, their capabilities, and therefore their future. It is to understand our history is to be able to fight for our future, to understand what our capabilities are. We don't study the October Revolution and the leadership given to it by Lenin and Stalin because we're some kind of historical reenactment society. We do it because they were great exponents of Marxist science. They have so much to teach us. What kind of idiot would not want to learn from the greatest exponents of the science they are trying to practice? It is our job to debunk the idea that study is something like old-fashioned or unnecessary. The British working class was identified even in Marx's day as being very backward theoretically and opposed to study. We have to break this if we're going to make progress, comrades, and we have to be proud of breaking it and proud of saying, no, I study history not as a professor, but as a revolutionary, to bring the truths it contains to the masses so they can fight and win. That's our job. To stand up against bourgeois propaganda, to strengthen our collective capabilities, to analyse correctly, to maximise and harness the power of collective understanding, collective action, to build the British base of the worldwide axis of anti-imperialist resistance and to go forward to a world of socialism and prosperity. That's what we're here for, comrades. That's the tradition we are carrying forward. That's why we invite you, all of you who are not already members, to join with us, join this struggle. There is nothing more worthwhile you can do with your life in this world where imperialism dominates the globe and creates bloodshed, poverty, immiseration, disease everywhere it goes. There's only one useful thing to do while this system still exists, and that is to be part of the force dedicated to fighting and overthrowing it. Thank you, comrades. everybody. We're going to sing the international, and then you get to have some barbecue.
Arise, these lovings from the slumbers. Arise, ye prisoners of want. For reason in revolt of thunders, and at last ends the age of cats. So away with all your superstitions, so our masses arise, arise. We'll change what's quickly on conditions and turn the dust to win the prize. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face the international ally, unites the human race. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face the international ally, unites the human race.
Thank you, comrades. Please join us in the garden for food and socialising.